Welcome to Stories from Sight, the renovation podcast that digs a little deeper. I'm Amy Dornalic, and together with my co-host Jane Middlehurst, we peek behind the curtains of those Insta-worthy interiors to bring you the real processes people went through to make their dream homes a reality. After 10 years as architects renovating homes, Jane and I set up HomeNotes to teach people how to take on their own renovation journeys. We've met so many inspiring people on the way, and now we want to share their incredible stories. This week we talked to Katie, who started a loft extension of her Victorian terrace house, only for her main contractor to disappear after taking her roof off, leaving her exposed to the winter weather. With the help of a stellar team of carpenters who stepped up to complete the project, Katie took up the lead in the renovation to ensure the vision she had started with got realised. We talked with her about the journey and how it feels to have gotten over the finish line. So welcome, Katie. I'm excited about talking to you today because your renovation story is quite a story. But first up, do you want to tell us a bit about the house you bought, what drew you to it, and a bit about it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was a little bit of a drama, the kind of how we got to where we are now. We've actually been in the house for such a long time, almost a decade. I think it's 9 years this year. So it's been quite a long journey. Yeah, so we were renting in actually southwest London, totally priced out, trying to look for a house, 9-month-old baby in tow, the whole kind of story, all that stuff. We just kept moving further around London until we got to southeast London, back to where I'm from, actually. And I remember adamantly being like, I don't want to go back home. It felt like a real big step backwards. Obviously, my husband was a bit more practical, a bit like, it's good schools, it's a good commute, all that kind of tick in the boxes. But the house, I remember coming round, I didn't really like it. It's a Victorian property, or a late Victorian / on the verge of Edwardian property. Liked the kind of bone, but it was so dark, and every room I felt like needed redecorating, and they had the bathroom downstairs. Looking, at what was around at the time, we were like, no, okay, this has got potential. So at least we can put our stamp on it. And it was within our budget and everything. We got it a bit lower than our budget because we made a kind of cheeky offer. And they actually had a previous buyer which fell through. And when you have your mortgage offer, it was running out for them and they were panicking. They were like, we need a buyer. So from the day we made an offer to getting the keys was 28 days.
Wow.
We did it so quick. But obviously at this point, we had not even given notice to our landlord. And we just thought we'd go even more for broke and do some work on the house. So in the 6 weeks, we opened up, some of the walls and stuff, new floors downstairs, ceiling roses in, cornicing, cleaned up the fireplaces and redecorated top to bottom white. Just white. I didn't do any kind of heavy work. Moved the gas box. And that was because I had the vision that I'd always open up the kitchen area. And when we brought it, it had the old water tank and the boiler was on the internal walls. So we had all the gas pipes run down the external side of the house. Just kind of a bit of future planning, as it were. What we didn't plan for was that I would get pregnant after 2 months of moving in. So that sort of put a massive spanner in the works because obviously we'd sort of pushed ourselves buying the house, having to pay mortgage and rent, and then doing the works up. So that sort of put life on a bit of a hold, really, because in our heads we thought, right, next year we're going to start doing all the house up, and it was suddenly like, no, we're going to have 2 under 2. And at the time I was working full time, I've been out in the city, and I just completely changed our lifestyle and how we approach this, because suddenly it was like 1 minute with no family living nearby, and both of them under 2, it's like full on nursery fee. So I just stepped back from working for quite a while because it just wasn't really feasible. So when I was pregnant with Sophie, the only thing we did was landscape the whole garden. And I'm so glad we did, because then obviously the garden was done. We'd made the house like a real fresh, clean palette. So although it wasn't as we wanted it to be our dream house, it was all white, nice wood floors, just really clean. And, I've always collected vintage furniture and stuff. So it just had a lot of kind of personality in us. And actually for a long time, we lived with it like this. So that kind of couple of years went by, and then COVID. So that was all fun for everyone, wasn't it? And we thought we'd got through, and we had the first COVID lockdown and everyone came out of it and was all living freedom. We then at the time got an architect, which was quite hilarious because the architect kind of did some drawings. I was a bit like, kind of what I was thinking. So I did an interior design degree, but I'm not very good at computers. I can draw. So I basically redrew the whole house on paper, though. He hated me. And I was like, can you just make sure that doesn't fall down? Talk to the structural engineer. Is that feasible? And they made sure the calculations were right and stuff. So that was it really, like going forwards.
So you didn't extend, but you did the loft.
So what we wanted to do was downstairs in the kitchen, it's very long at the back. And so rather than paying for an absolute full side return, we wanted to keep a kind of small courtyard and then just make the end part, which is our dining area, full width. So just so you've just got that little bit of extra space for a dining table and stuff. But our local authority were a nightmare. Like we put planning in, 6 weeks later, they'd be like, not sure about that. Then you'd have to go in again. And they did it with the loft and they did it for the downstairs. And we just couldn't figure out why they kept doing it. And initially we thought, well, we'll just do the loft first. And then next year we'll tackle downstairs anyway, because we obviously were living in with 2 kids. And we obviously got the obligatory like lockdown dog. Yeah, so we had the first lockdown, came up that. So we were very hesitant. You know, some people did stuff from straight away from even the first lockdown, didn't they? But I think we were very much like hold up. Suddenly husband's working from home, we're all in the house, all doing homeschooling. And so we got through that phase and we thought, oh, the world's opening up again. This is more feasible, getting builders and stuff. And obviously everyone had the same idea. So trying to secure a builder was a nightmare. We had some neighbours though who recommended a builder and he was like, well, I'm too busy. It'll be another 6 months. Okay, fine, don't worry. So went and got the dog just to make life more difficult. And then I'm not kidding. I think we got the dog. And then 2 weeks later, the builder was like, oh, my job's fallen through. I can start next week. We're like, what? Literally the scaffolding rocked up. And so this is now like the 1st of December, 2020. And we're like, okay, we're doing this. And initially it was just a loft. And I'm within a week, like the roof had gone, wrap around scaffolding up, the worst storms I think ever we had that winter. We had a chimney nearly collapse and fall through the ceiling. So that was fun. Yeah, so he was doing well and it all started off really well. And then mid-January, he just started disappearing and not coming back. And we were like, where have you been for the last week, 2 weeks? Oh, yeah, I'm coming. And basically just went AWOL. And then we went back into a second lockdown. So suddenly we're all in the house with no roof, scaffolding, a dog. That was a nightmare. Puppy. And a Dalmatian, by the way, not the cute cockapoo. We had to go for something a bit extra, didn't we? Yeah, so that was really tricky to navigate. And actually, that's one thing, I think, talking to you about some of your questions. Like, it's so tricky trying to find trusted contractors, isn't it? You're always taking a risk. And we had a contract and everything. You know, it's not like we went in there blindly and actually contractors don't mean anything. We looked it up. We looked up legally, what can we do? And pretty much there's just no resources out there to help you. They can just disappear.
Did he disappear and that was it then?
I think it got to about February, end of February. I hadn't seen him for about 3 or 4 weeks and it got quite stressful because of everything had been ripped out. Then kind of weirdly is that the builder that we'd had some guys who had come and done a lot of the carpentry, you know, all the wooden joists and stuff. And they were incredible. And I'm so grateful now that I took their business card. And I kind of rang them like, any chance you're around? Please, kind of told them the sob story. And they were just absolutely disgusted with what our builder had done and like left us in the lurch, especially with the kids and stuff. And they couldn't help us immediately, but they were like, right, okay, well, we're around from April, so we can come back and help then.
But you started in January.
Yeah. So we had no roof. All the steels were in the loft, all the joists and stuff, the wraparound scaffolding. The boiler did go in, luckily, because I found a subcontractor who put the boiler in and we put the boiler in the loft. So luckily that was all running, but it's all a bit high risk because obviously your boiler is out in the elements a bit. You know, it should really be all like in a cupboard and safe and stuff. Yes. And it was weird, like going up there and just walking around in this, it was just freezing, right? Because the whole top of the house was open. And the reason why we ended up doing downstairs is because we really wanted to secure them and to basically sweeten the deal. We just said to them, look, we are looking to do downstairs as well. And sort of used that as a bargaining chip because no one wanted to touch it. We had about 4 builders come around because it had already been started. Just no one wants to get involved. Some of them were like, they want to rip it all down and do it again. And I mean, obviously it did all meet regs and it was all fine. The reg guy came, checked it all again, and I had him make sure everything was absolutely fine. After this guy, you know, I was a bit paranoid that things hadn't been done right. But yeah, so our guys from MD Works who ended up doing all the house were incredible because they finished the loft for us on a day rate, which is like unheard of. that it did us a massive favour, because also they weren't just, oh, we'll do it on a day rate and like faff around. They were working like machines, and in a way we had to do it like that, because it wasn't like, oh, it's this room that's unfinished. It was like bits and pieces and all different stuff. And then having to find a subcontractor that our builder had already bloody engaged, had to come back and do the roof. You know, we had a different electrician, a plumber, and the roofers. It was all really messy. And I was like trying to manage that and homeschool. Basically, he hadn't paid anyone.
Oh, so they came knocking on your door.
Exactly. And you're in a point where when we worked out, I think we lost about 30 grand, to be honest, of money, because what are you going to do? I can't have someone disconnect my boiler when you've got 2 kids. You know, you just had to sort of suck it up. That was a lot of stress.
So were you paying everybody just individually for the jobs that they were coming in to do?
Luckily, they'd already done quotes, and I'd been copied in the emails in what their quote was for the job.
And what about the builder? I mean, because they obviously still are in contact with him probably. Did he sever ties from them as well?
He just went completely AWOL.
Wow. Did anyone have any ideas what happened?
No idea. I feel really bad for my neighbours who were recommended. So I had one neighbour across the road recommended, and then like someone around the corner who recommended him, and they just like feel really bad about it. And then they heard that he did it to someone else as well. So he was kind of tagging jobs and doing that.
Yeah. It sounds like he got just completely in trouble. But that's the tricky thing, isn't it? If there aren't many people out there who are absolute cowboys, like he was pretending to be a contractor and he actually didn't have any of the skills. He obviously had done a good job for your neighbour, and you just can't tell when the pinch point's going to come. One job to the next can be totally different because of the circumstances which they find themselves in.
Yeah, I just think he just didn't have the management skills. And I mean, he didn't come in as the cheapest contractor. We weren't like going for a bargain here. You know, he came in middle of the road, which I always think seems fair enough, doesn't it? He had recommendations. Afterwards, we'd spoken to a company, you know, that specializes in lofts, you know, those big companies, but they're super professional, aren't they? And when they send you your quote, it's so itemized. They know what they're doing and they know how to kind of bang them out. He came like middle with that. And I actually went with him because I thought, oh, well, he's more of a local guy. He's more of an independent business, maybe a slight rookie mistake on our part. But it did mean that we got to meet our guys, who now are like my favorite people in the world, honestly. They've now like worked on 3 or 4 of my friends' properties and done amazing jobs and are always there for us. And that's really important, isn't it? I mean, these people are in your home and around you and your family and stuff. And they were just so lovely and caring. And it made it, get a bit emotional.
I'm sorry that we're taking you back to such a stressful time.
But I think it just shows there are some really decent people out there. It's a messy job for them, right? I mean, they didn't make any profit really on the loft that much, you know, because they're working so hard. And they did a fantastic job. But as you say, because then I took over, well, completely managing it anyway, everything was separate, right? I had to go and find the glazing company, and just everything was, I had to look up and source.
You were basically now the main contractor, organising everything.
Yeah. And having to problem solve and stuff. I mean, luckily, like my dad was a fireman / builder. That happened a lot back in the 80s. And I mean, so I think I'm quite practical, quite logical. So that helped a lot. And obviously with my interior background as well, to question things is so important. Luckily, the second guys were not the kind of guys to be like, oh, you don't want to do it like that, love. Luckily, they weren't condescending like that. But you do get that in the industry a lot, you know, that people don't really want to maybe make the effort or try something new. Especially with Victorian terrace, there's a pretty much of a standard of what you're going to get and what's going to happen. And lots of companies, you know, they have the windows that they always use because they've probably got a contract with a certain company, and they've just always done it like that. So when you start to want to do things a little bit different, people kind of get a little bit nervous, don't they? Or they realise, oh no, this is going to take me a few more days. So it worked really well having our guys, because obviously if I'm getting them to do more work, they're like, okay, it's a few more days, but they were really on board with kind of our creative vision. And I had it all like stuck around each room, kind of like my mood boards and, you know, what I wanted and the finish and stuff. So for example, in the loft, we've got reclaimed floorboards because I wanted it to look like original Victorian flooring. It was quite important to me to make it look like it was the top of the house rather than a loft conversion.
Yes.
So our staircase is continuous as well, so that it feels like it's always been there.
That's such a lot of work to push against the system, especially when you're in that very precarious situation. I'm really amazed with how you pushed it all through, not only to get yourself a roof, but to make it what you wanted to. I just think that takes such guts.
It was so difficult to try and keep like a creative vision. Because don't forget, we've been thinking about what we want to do to the house for 7 years, right? We haven't just brought it and gone, oh, I'm just going to bang a loft conversion and move out.
You said it started January. When was it when you felt like you were finished?
So our guys strictly do not work in August, our builders. They never work in August and they leave the country. They go, they go. And so they literally kept saying to us, it's 22nd of July, we're off. And it pretty much just finished like the 21st of July. What we didn't have were the back doors and the side window. But, that wasn't really to do with them. That was the glazing company. So they just left it with a big, massive chipboard seal. So it was quite a massive reveal, like in the August or something when the doors finally turned up. That was amazing, right? Because we opened all this up, but it was darker than it had ever been. And then suddenly we were like, oh, like you can see me now, I'm blinded by the sun right now. So they were incredible and they were on schedule.
There's nothing better than a hard deadline.
It's a really funny day actually, is that my husband and I were working upstairs, the dog was upstairs. Kids, I think, were back at school at this point. And the guys had said, oh, we're going to be doing the stairs and stuff. I'm like, okay. And this is how efficient they were. I'm not kidding. I had like a few bangs, whatever. And then I came out of the room and there's no staircase. Like there's no staircase. I'm just upstairs and there was no staircase. And I was like, the dog needs to go out. And they were like, oh, so there's us like airlifting a dog down in a bed sheet. With these, like, all our builders, like, trying to catch this really, like, dogs are really, like, front heavy, aren't they? And I'm thinking, like, flipped off at one point, just all the comical stuff. And then they were like, oh, we'll get you a ladder so you can go up and down. And we're like, oh, goodness.
Oh, my goodness.
We're living like this. But they were so quick. Like, the actual downstairs took 6 weeks. It did mean I had to make a lot of decisions quickly. So I think, I would be there researching. Like, I think I ordered about 5 different kitchen taps, we're trying to make a decision because you suddenly just feel like, oh, this is permanent. This is what we're going to have. And actually sometimes your decisions are made for you because if you have got a time restraint, you might want that dream thing. And then they're like, oh, it's not coming for 12 weeks. You're like, oh, well, that's out. So that's the only thing that if you are embarking on making your absolute dream home, I think just buy all your stuff before or look into it because it's all those detail things that you don't think you need to think of. And actually, I feel like some of the tiny detail things almost had to be thought of before we even built the house, like to make sure they can be incorporated or they can be planned for. So having a really clear vision is important because it's stuff like, the first thing a contractor does is all your plumbing and your electrics. And if you don't know where you want your plug socket or if you want to have wall lights or additional ceiling lights, either you're spending a lot of money afterwards cutting your walls out, or you're just having to compromise from a real finished, put together look. And I guess that's where interior designers come in, making sure that's kind of in the forefront.
We were just chatting to someone the other day, actually, was like, when do I make those decisions? A lot of people want to stand in the room to see what it feels like, to know where they want stuff. And we're trying to say by that point, it's probably a bit too late. So, it sounds like you have experienced high highs and low lows and everything in between. But I guess I would like to know, how does it feel now? How is your enjoyment of the space? I know that you've been using it as a location house.
Yeah, that's a massive compliment in a way, isn't it? Having your house as a location house. And it's so weird having like brands, like we had like Wagamama here and Nike and then, seeing your house as a backdrop. But it's pretty cool, when you put so much effort in. It doesn't mean it has to stay quite tidy though. At least that motivates that. It's such a useful space for us. Now it's not completely open plan, but because we've lived here for 7 years, we were like, no, kids are really noisy and we need a room that we can close the door on. And there's certain things you suddenly realize that your lifestyle actually dictates. And lockdown probably helped us with some decisions because suddenly realizing how people were having to now work. Previously neither of us were working from home. Yeah. So we all suddenly need like a home office or at least a space that you can use as a home office. And it is amazing to think we didn't actually even extend downstairs. That was just reconfiguring. I drew and redrew the downstairs, over and over again to try and get that to work. So no, the sense of achievement's great. But it's weird. It's very quickly became just what we've got used to. It just felt very quickly like our home. I think dreaming it up for so long and it coming to life was fantastic. But I think also the way we've done it, the way we've done the staircase and the continuation, I can't even now envision how the house didn't ever have a top floor, because it just seems to be so like organic to how the house should have been. And you've got to look at the silver lining. I guess all the delays we had, it did mean, I spent forever planning that bathroom upstairs because no one was around building anything. So, I wanted a brass towel rail. And I don't know if you've ever tried to buy a brass towel rail, though they just don't exist. You can get brass plated, or you can get the ones that are kind of plasticky looking, fake, and it's just not a good look. So I found a company that makes them. At this point, we hadn't spent all our money, so it was a pretty penny. The most expensive towel rail in the world, but at least I got a very nice towel rail in the loft bathroom.
I like the vision of the boiler just sat on its own, like with all the flapping things. It's just like, but there's going to be this towel rail and everything's going to be okay.
Exactly. I was just like endearingly tucked it on my way past out the bathroom. But yeah, gosh, when I think back then, and that's all I was focusing on, I was unaware of actually the stuff that would be going on. There are a lot more serious things in life than this. It was a lot, but, there are a lot more serious things going on in the world. And I guess it is how you adapt with it and how you move with it. I guess that's the only advice I would have. It's not going to be forever, right? Nothing's going to be forever. Luckily, we found people that we could trust. I don't think it would have happened without them. And they liked our vision. They weren't mocking or, they wouldn't roll their eyes. I was tricky at some point. There's a bit in the kitchen where we have like a slight post. A slight post. The tantrum I had about that, because I had a vision where it'd be nice and clean and there wouldn't be a slight post. And I remember being so upset about it. They were doing everything in their power to try and fix this thing and make it as small as possible. And I had a complete dummy out the pram moment. And now it's done. I'm like, it looks absolutely fine. What was I even making such a drama about? But at the time, it felt like the most important thing. And I think that's what happens when you are doing a renovation. You become extremely insular. You're very focused, aren't you, on what you're doing and what's happening. And in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be fine. And I think you have to be a bit humble and appreciate it could have been nothing. It could have really gone tits up, right, and not happened at all. So I think we just take that. We're quite fortunate. We're all very privileged, aren't we, really, in our lives, if you're managing to own a house and then spend money doing it up.
You've explained the experience so well, and I think it's going to be really useful for people because it's a reality that a lot of people face. And perhaps if you're in the middle of that, you want to know that it's possible to come out of the other side.
Yeah, it's going to be okay.
Thanks so much for your time today and revisiting your experience with us. And it really just makes the finished home even more incredible when you know the story behind it. And for anyone who wants to see Casey's finished home, take a look on our website at homenotes.co/stories from site. Or I'd 100% recommend following Casey over on Instagram, and we will put her link to her profile in the show notes below. Okay, that's all for today's episode. Have an amazing week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. Renovating can be a roller coaster, and if you're at the beginning of your renovation journey, come and find out about our Getting Started course at homenotes.co to make sure you get the best value from your project. Finally, if you've enjoyed this episode, then please do follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, as it will help us reach as many people as possible and all learn from these amazing experiences.